He was 34 years old, sitting across from a woman 9 years older than him, and every single person in that room thought he had made a mistake. His best friend leaned over and whispered, "You can still switch. Nobody would blame you." Nathan Reed looked at the woman across the table, sharp eyes, tired smile, a coffee cup she hadn't touched. And he made a decision that would change the rest of his life. He stayed. What happened next surprised everyone, including Nathan himself. If you've ever been told that something was wrong before it even had a chance to begin, this story is for you. Like this video and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The Columbus Singles Social was held on a Thursday evening in mid-October in the back room of a wine bar called Tilden's that smelled like candle wax and cedar, and the particular kind of quiet desperation that assembles whenever a group of adults admit, in unison, that they are trying. String lights had been taped to exposed brick. Name tags were printed in a cheerful serif font. Someone had arranged a small chalkboard near the entrance that read, "Great things start with a hello." And beneath that, in smaller letters, someone else had added with a pen, or a restraining order. The addition had not been erased. Nathan Reed arrived 8 minutes late because he'd had to drive back to his apartment twice, once for his wallet and once because he simply sat in the parking lot of his building and considered not going at all. He was not, by nature, a social mixer kind of person. He was the kind of person who remembered exactly what he'd ordered at a restaurant 3 years ago, who kept a spreadsheet tracking which grocery store had the best produce prices by season, who considered a successful Friday evening to be one in which he finished a chapter of a book and was in bed before 11. His therapist, Dr. Patel, had described him as internally rich but externally cautious, which Nathan privately suspected was a generous way of calling him boring. He went to Tilden's because his friend Marcus had registered them both without asking, and because Marcus had a gift for making Nathan feel that saying no was a kind of small death. Also because Dr. Patel had said, very quietly, at the end of their last session, "Nathan, the life you rebuilt is solid, but solid isn't the same as full." He hadn't answered that. He just thanked her and left. But here he was. Inside, the room held maybe 30 people arranged in clusters, everyone working hard to look comfortable. Nathan took a name tag, Nathan, 34, Logistics, and peeled off the backing with more focus than the task required. A woman near the wine table caught his eye and smiled with the specific brightness of someone who had decided tonight was going to be wonderful through sheer force of will. Nathan smiled back and immediately looked away. Marcus materialized at his elbow within seconds, holding a glass of red wine and radiating the kind of unearned confidence that Nathan had always envied and occasionally resented. "You showed up," Marcus said, sounding genuinely surprised. "You registered me without asking." "I registered you because you wouldn't have asked." Marcus clinked his glass against Nathan's still empty hand. "Go get a drink. There are real people here. One of them might be for you." "I'm not looking for someone to be for me." "Then consider it practice," Marcus said. "You're rusty." Nathan was, in fact, rusty. The divorce from Claire had been finalized 2.5 years ago, and in the time since, he'd been on exactly 4 dates, all of which had been fine in the way that a lukewarm shower was fine, technically functional, not unpleasant, immediately forgotten. He wasn't bitter about Claire anymore. That had taken a while and a lot of Dr. Patel's time, but he'd gotten there. What he was, if he was honest, was careful. Careful the way a person is careful after they've broken something important and spent months figuring out what went wrong, which pieces were theirs to own and which ones weren't. He got a beer and found a spot near the wall where he could watch without being too obviously watched, which was his default position at any gathering. The organizers, 2 women in matching branded lanyards, were moving through the room with clipboards, pairing people up for a structured speed dating portion of the evening. Nathan had read about this on the website. 5 rounds, 7 minutes each assigned pairings. He told himself it was fine. 7 minutes was nothing. 7 minutes was the length of a commute. He watched the pairings happen around him. A man in a blazer got matched with a laughing woman who immediately touched his arm. A nervous redhead was paired with someone who seemed equally nervous, and they stood a careful foot apart like 2 magnets oriented the wrong way. People were adjusting, recalibrating, deciding in their first 10 seconds whether this would be worth the next 7 minutes. Then one of the organizers, her lanyard read Becca, appeared at Nathan's side with a clipboard and the smile of someone managing multiple small problems simultaneously. "Nathan Reed?" she asked. "Yeah." "Okay, great. You're paired with—" She checked her clipboard. "Evelyn, table 7. She pointed. Nathan looked. Table 7 was near the back of the room, partially separated from the main cluster by a wooden partition with trailing ivy. A woman sat there alone, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, despite the fact that Tilden's didn't appear to serve coffee. She must have brought it herself, Nathan realized. She'd brought coffee to a wine bar. She was reading something on her phone with her glasses pushed up into dark hair that had been put up and was partially falling out of its own arrangement. She hadn't looked up. Her name tag said Evelyn 43. Education. 43. Nathan did the math without meaning to. 9 years. He was 34, she was 43. That was not what he'd expected. He wasn't sure what he'd expected, but something closer to his age, maybe. Someone in the same approximate chapter of life. 43 meant a different decade entirely, a different set of experiences, probably a different set of whatever made someone show up alone to a singles mixer on a Thursday in October. He started toward table 7. Marcus intercepted him before he got there. "Hey," Marcus said, low, hand on Nathan's arm. "I saw who they put you with." "Evelyn. She's 43, man." "I know." "You could ask to switch. Becca over there looks like she'd trade you in a second. There's a woman near the bar who keeps looking over." "Marcus. I'm just saying. You came here to actually meet someone, right? You want it to be realistic." Nathan looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at table 7. Evelyn still hadn't looked up from her phone. She'd taken a sip of her coffee, frowned slightly at it, and set it back down. "I'm going to go sit down," Nathan said. "Nate? She's a person, Marcus. I'm going to go sit down." He walked away before Marcus could say anything else, wound through the small tables and the bodies and the ambient noise of 30 people trying, and pulled out the chair across from Evelyn Brooks at table 7. She looked up then. Her eyes were dark brown behind her glasses, which she still hadn't brought down from her hair. She had the kind of face that didn't give much away immediately. Composed even, the lines of it suggesting someone who had trained herself not to react before she knew what she was reacting to. She looked at him with an assessment that was quick and unashamed. "Nathan," she said, reading his name tag. "Logistics." "Evelyn," he said. "Education." "You say that like you're confirming a package delivery." He blinked. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. "I guess I do." She looked at him again, slightly differently. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you," he said. "What did you expect?" He thought about it. "I don't know. I didn't really have a picture. You brought coffee." She glanced down at her mug like she'd forgotten it was there. "They don't have coffee. I need coffee after 6, or I fall asleep at social events, sometimes before 6 if the event is bad enough." "Is this event bad?" "It's too early to tell," she said. "Ask me in 7 minutes." The organizer rang a small bell, and the round began. Nathan had a method for these things, developed across his 4 post-divorce dates and what he now thought of as the general project of being a person in the world. He asked questions, not personal ones, not right away, not the "where do you see yourself in 5 years" kind that felt like job interviews, and not the "what's your love language" kind that felt like quizzes. He asked about things, books, what someone thought about, driving home, what made a day feel like it had been worth something. He asked Evelyn what she taught. "4th grade," she said, "Columbus City Schools. I've been doing it for 15 years. Do you like it?" She seemed to consider the question more carefully than he expected, as if she was deciding whether to give the polished answer or the real one. "I like the work," she said finally. "I like the kids. The system is complicated. The system is something I work with because I don't have a better option yet. Yet. I'm persistent." "What does persistent look like in 4th grade education?" "A lot of grant applications," she said. "A lot of staying after school. A lot of arguing with administrators about curriculum decisions made by people who haven't been in a classroom since 1987. She said it without particular heat, like she was reporting the weather. And a lot of moments that make all of that feel like the only job worth doing. A kid reads a paragraph out loud for the first time without stopping. Someone makes a connection between something we read and something in their life. You can see it land. She paused. That sounds probably idealistic. No, Nathan said. It doesn't. She looked at him. Most people say that's wonderful here and move on to the next question. I'm not most people. He wasn't sure why he said that. It came out sounding more certain than he felt. We'll see, Evelyn said, but something in her expression shifted. Not much, just enough. Like a small adjustment. He told her about logistics, which was not, he acknowledged, the most riveting subject. Supply chain management for a mid-sized distribution company out of Westerville, coordinating the movement of goods from origin to delivery, spending a lot of time on the phone with people who were frustrated about things that weren't his fault. He said it plainly, without the apologetic self-deprecation that usually crept in when he described his work to people at parties who were clearly waiting to talk about something else. Evelyn listened. Actually listened, not just waited. You make it sound like puzzle solving, she said. It is, mostly. Something's always broken or late or wrong, and there's usually a way through if you can figure out what the actual constraint is. What's the actual constraint usually? Information, he said. People not telling each other what they know. He paused. Or fear. People not wanting to flag a problem because they're worried about the reaction. She nodded slowly. That's also teaching. The not communicating part? The fear part, she said. Kids who know the answer but won't raise their hand because they're more afraid of being wrong than they are curious about being right. She turned her coffee mug slightly. You unlearn that eventually if someone teaches you to. Did someone teach you? Eventually, she said, and didn't elaborate. The bell rang. 7 minutes. The round was over. Nathan became aware that he'd leaned forward at some point, his forearms on the table, and that Evelyn had done the same. The small space between them felt different than it had when he sat down, less like the start of something obligatory and more like the middle of something that hadn't declared itself yet. Becca appeared with her clipboard. Round 2. Some of you will switch tables. Some will stay. Nathan, you're staying at 7. Your new partner will be... We'd like to keep talking, Evelyn said. Becca looked at her. Then at Nathan. The pairings are set, Becca said carefully. I understand, Evelyn said, with the particular tone of a woman who had spent 15 years getting school administrators to see things her way. But neither of us has anywhere else to be, and I think the point of the evening is to make connections. We're making one. She said it calmly, without apology. I'm sure you can find a workaround. Becca looked between them again, then at her clipboard, then made a small note. I'll see what I can do. She walked away. Nathan looked at Evelyn. You do that a lot? Ask for what I want? She picked up her coffee. I used to not. I don't do that anymore. They stayed at table 7 for the rest of the structured portion of the evening, and then for the unstructured portion after that, when the string lights got a little dimmer and people collected their coats and filtered out in twos and small groups. Marcus passed Nathan's table twice, and the second time Nathan caught his eye and shook his head, very slightly, and Marcus raised his hands and kept walking. Evelyn didn't seem to notice Marcus or anyone else at the periphery. She was focused in a way that Nathan found unusual and a little disarming. Not the performance of focus that some people did on dates, the exaggerated attention that was really just a technique, but something more like genuine interest, unself-conscious, the kind of listening that meant she tracked what he'd said 3 exchanges ago and circled back to it. She did that when they got onto books. It started because Nathan mentioned, offhandedly, that he'd been trying to read more fiction. He mostly read nonfiction, he said, history, mostly, with occasional detours into economics or science writing. But a colleague had given him a novel, and he'd been putting it off for months the way you put off something you suspect will require more from you than you currently want to give. What novel? Evelyn asked. The Remains of the Day. She went quiet for a moment. Why have you been putting it off? I don't know exactly, he said. I think I'm afraid it's going to be sad. It is sad, she said. It's deeply sad. But it's not sad the way you're dreading. It's not sad because bad things happen. It's sad because the main character spent his whole life being loyal to things and people that weren't worth the loyalty, and he only understands that when it's too late to do anything different. She paused. Which is actually worse, honestly, but also the most human thing I've ever read. Nathan was quiet for a moment. That is worse. But it's worth it, she said. The book, I mean. You should read it. Have you read it more than once? 3 times, she said. Different things hurt each time. First time it was the waist. Second time it was the missed connection. Third time, she stopped, seemed to decide something. Third time I understood why he kept doing it, why you keep being loyal to something even when it's costing you, because changing would mean admitting that the cost was real. Nathan said nothing for a moment. The wine bar had thinned considerably. Somewhere behind them, someone was stacking chairs. That's very specific, he said finally. The third reading. I was going through something, she said. You don't have to explain. I know. She looked at him. I had a marriage that lasted 8 years. It ended when my daughter was 4. I stayed longer than I should have because leaving felt like failure, and I had a very particular relationship with failure at that point. The book made sense differently after that. He held that for a moment. There was no performance in the way she said it. No bid for sympathy, no dramatic pause, no signal that she needed anything from him in response. It was just the truth, offered plainly. My marriage lasted 6 years, Nathan said. It ended 2.5 years ago. I've been told I rebuilt well. He looked at his beer. I think what I actually did was rebuild carefully, which isn't the same. No, Evelyn said. It isn't. Your daughter, Nathan said. How old is she now? 9, Evelyn said, and something changed in her face. Not softened exactly, brightened was more accurate, a kind of heat that wasn't there before. Her name is Emma. Evelyn paused, and Nathan could see her trying to find the right word and discarding several. She sees things differently than most people. She has this whole internal world that she lets you into in pieces when she decides she trusts you. She made up a language last year. A whole language with rules that she uses to write in her notebook so no one can read them unless she teaches you. Does she teach people? She's taught 3 people, Evelyn said. Me, her best friend at school, and our neighbor Mrs. Callahan, who is 78 and says learning it has been the best thing that happened to her in a decade. Nathan smiled. It happened before he could arrange his face into something more neutral. She sounds like someone worth knowing. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. She is, she said quietly. She really is. At some point, Nathan couldn't have said exactly when, the conversation stopped being the kind of conversation you have when you're learning someone and became the kind you have when you already know them, or think you might. It was a subtle shift, like a temperature change you only notice after the fact. The careful part of his brain, the part that kept track of exits and appropriate emotional distance, was still there, but had gone quiet. Not silenced, just not in charge for once. They talked about failure, about what it felt like to be 34 or 43 and know that the thing you thought your life would be hadn't turned out to be the thing. About how strange it was that this realization, which should have been devastating, sometimes felt more like relief. Like finally putting down a weight you'd been carrying so long you forgot it had a shape. I thought I'd have more figured out by now, Nathan admitted. He wasn't sure why he said it, except that it was true. And she seemed like someone who could hear true things without making them into something larger than they were. What's more figured out supposed to look like? Evelyn asked. I don't know. Less uncertain, maybe. More purposeful. I think uncertainty might be purposeful, she said. I think it means you're still paying attention. He looked at her. Or it means I'm telling myself something comfortable, she added. I do that. The honest version is probably somewhere in the middle, he said. Most things are, she said. The bar closed at 11. They were the last 2 people at table 7, and one of the staff was mopping the floor near the entrance with the resigned efficiency of someone who had decided not to make it their problem if the last customers took their time. Evelyn put on her coat, a worn caramel-colored wool coat that had a button slightly different from the others, clearly replaced at some point and not perfectly matched. Nathan noticed it the way he noticed details when his attention was fully engaged rather than managed. "This was better than I expected," she said. "It was a simple thing," said simply. "What did you expect?" "An awkward 7 minutes and a glass of wine I didn't finish," she said. "This was considerably more." "It was," he agreed. They stood outside Tilden's for a moment in the October air, which was sharp and smelled like someone's wood-burning fireplace a few streets over. The street was mostly quiet. A few cars. A streetlight with a yellowing halo. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said. "You've been asking me things all evening," Evelyn said. "I don't see why you'd stop now. Would you want to do this again? Not a mixer, just coffee, maybe, or whatever you actually want to drink." Evelyn studied him for a moment. Not the quick assessment from when he first sat down, but something slower, like she was checking something against something else. "You should know," she said, "that I come with complications. Emma is my priority, and that's not going to change. My schedule is real, and it's not flexible on school nights. I'm not looking for something casual that has a shelf life I have to manage. I've done that, and it's exhausting." "I'm not looking for casual," Nathan said. "I'm not even sure I know how to do casual." "Your friend thinks I'm too old," she said. "Not a question." "Marcus has strong opinions about a lot of things," Nathan said. "He's wrong about most of them." Something moved across her face. Brief. Not quite a smile, but in the same territory. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. "Give me your number," she said. "I'll text you." He did. She typed it in, and a moment later his phone buzzed in his pocket with a message. "Evelyn from Table 7. I'll be in touch." She put her phone away and looked at him once more. "Good night, Nathan from Logistics." "Good night, Evelyn from Education." He watched her walk to her car, a dark blue Subaru with a dented rear bumper and a parking sticker for Columbus City Schools in the window. She unlocked it without looking back, got in, and pulled out of the spot with a competence that suggested she was someone who did not linger in parking lots, who moved from one place to the next with purpose and without ceremony. Nathan stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than was necessary. "Well?" Marcus appeared behind him, appearing from nowhere in the way Marcus always did, with the timing of someone who had clearly been waiting. "Well, what?" Nathan said. "How was it?" Nathan thought about it. About the coffee she'd brought herself, and the language Emma had invented, and the 3 times she'd read The Remains of the Day, and how each reading had cost her something different. About the way she'd asked for what she wanted from Becca, and the way she'd said, "I don't do that anymore." About standing in a mostly empty wine bar and talking about failure like it was just a thing that happened to people, which it was, which he'd somehow needed someone to say out loud. "It was good," he said. Marcus looked at him. "Just good?" Nathan picked up his keys from his pocket. "Let's go." But he was smiling when he said it, and Marcus, for once, let the question go. That night, Nathan sat on the edge of his bed and held his phone for longer than was productive. He read her text again, "Evelyn from Table 7. I'll be in touch," which told him nothing and something at the same time. He set the phone down and picked up The Remains of the Day from the stack on his nightstand where it had been sitting for 2 months. He opened to the first page. He read until almost 1 in the morning. He understood, already, why she'd said it was sad. It was the particular sadness of watching someone organize their entire life around something that was never going to give them what they actually needed, and being unable to stop because they'd built their whole identity on the scaffolding of that loyalty. He thought about careful and solid, and not the same as full. He thought about a 9-year-old girl who had invented a language and only taught it to people she trusted. His phone buzzed. He picked it up. "Evelyn from Table 7. Are you still awake?" He typed back, "Reading." 3 seconds. Then, "The book?" He looked at the cover, then back at his phone. "Yeah." A longer pause this time. Then, "It gets harder before it gets easier." He set the book face down on his knee, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom in his solid, carefully rebuilt life, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He couldn't have named it precisely. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was something earlier than happiness, something that happened in the moment just before you knew you were standing at the start of something, when it still could have been nothing and instead was becoming real. He typed, "I'll keep going." Her response came back quickly, just 3 words. "Good. You should." He kept reading. Evelyn texted him on a Saturday morning, 4 days after Tilden's, while he was standing in the cereal aisle of a grocery store debating between 2 boxes with the kind of focus that only made sense if you had nothing more pressing to decide. "Are you busy this afternoon?" He typed back, "No." Then added, "Cereal aisle, existential crisis." A pause. Then, "Which kind? Granola versus something with a cartoon mascot. Get the cartoon. Life's too short for virtuous cereal." He put the granola back and picked up the box with the cartoon toucan. It was a small, stupid thing, and it made him smile in the middle of the grocery store like an idiot. They met at a coffee shop on 5th Avenue called Groundwork, the kind of place that had been on the same corner for 15 years and resisted renovation the way certain people resisted change. Not out of stubbornness exactly, but out of a deep knowledge that what they had was already right. The chairs didn't match. The menu was written on a chalkboard that had been partially erased and rewritten so many times that some of the older letters had soaked into the slate permanently, ghost words haunting the edges. It smelled like espresso and something baked, warm and specific, the kind of smell that settled into your coat and came home with you. Evelyn was already there when Nathan arrived, which he'd half expected. She had the same coffee mug posture as before, both hands around it, elbows on the table, but her hair was down this time, and she wasn't wearing the wool coat. She looked different in daylight. Not better or worse, just more specific. Like a photograph taken with better light. She had a book open on the table next to her coffee, face down, and Nathan recognized the spine. "You're rereading it," he said, sitting down. She glanced at the book. "The Remains of the Day. 4th time, apparently. You started it, and now I couldn't stop thinking about it." She said this like she was mildly annoyed with him, but not actually annoyed. "How far did you get?" "Finished it Thursday night," he said. She looked at him. "You finished a 250-page novel in 2 days." "I couldn't stop," he said, "which I think was your warning." "I said it gets harder before it gets easier." "You were right." He settled back in his chair. The scene near the end, on the pier. When he finally admits it to himself and then immediately puts it away again, decides the best use of what's left is to become better at the performance. He shook his head. "That wrecked me a little." "That scene ruins me every time," she said, "because it's so reasonable. That's the worst part. His logic is completely sound. He just lands on the wrong conclusion." "Do you think he knows it's wrong?" Evelyn was quiet for a moment, turning her mug slightly. "I think he knows and won't let himself know. There's a difference." She looked up. "I think some people are very good at managing their own awareness, keeping things at a certain distance so they can function." "Speaking from experience?" "Speaking from about a decade of practice," she said, without apology. "I got better at stopping." The waitress came and Nathan ordered coffee and something called a cardamom roll that he wasn't sure about but seemed like the right thing to do here. Evelyn ordered a second cup and a slice of banana bread she broke apart with her hands rather than using the fork that came with it. He noticed she did things in small, practical ways that bypassed ceremony, ate with her hands, brought her own coffee to wine bars, said directly what she wanted. It wasn't rudeness, it was efficiency. The behavior of someone who had, at some point, decided that pretense cost more than it was worth. They talked for 2 hours, then 2.5. The cardamom roll turned out to be excellent, and he told her so with more enthusiasm than the subject probably warranted, and she said, "I told you this place was good," even though she hadn't told him anything about the place. She'd just named it. But he didn't point that out because it was the kind of thing that happened when 2 people were comfortable and conversation moved fast. He found out she was from Cincinnati originally, had come to Columbus for college and never left, which she described as either loyalty or inertia, and she wasn't always sure which. He found out her ex-husband's name was Daniel, that he lived in Portland now with a woman named Stephanie, that he was a decent father when he was consistent, which was about 60% of the time, and that Emma had learned to accept the 40% without letting it define her, which Evelyn said with the specific pride of a parent who has watched their child do something very hard and do it mostly on their own. She had to get there herself, Evelyn said. "I could support her, but I couldn't do the work for her." That's the thing about 9-year-olds. They're already more themselves than people give them credit for. What does she know about all of this? Nathan asked carefully. You going to mixers, meeting people? Evelyn considered him for a moment. She knows I went to a social thing. She doesn't know details. I don't introduce her to people I'm just getting to know. It's not a rule I had to think hard about. That makes sense. It's non-negotiable, she said, and it was said gently, without threat, but it was absolute. She's been through enough adjustments. Anyone in my life has to be worth the introduction before she meets them. Of course, Nathan said, and meant it without qualification. She looked at him again with that particular measuring look, and he'd started to understand that it wasn't suspicion, it was exactness. She was precise about people the way he was precise about logistics, trying to find the actual constraint, the real variable. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why didn't you switch tables? He blinked. What? At Tilden's. Your friend, Marcus, you said he suggested you ask for a different pairing. You didn't. Why not? Nathan thought about it honestly, because she was asking honestly. I don't entirely know, he said. I think I was tired of optimizing for what looked right. I've done a lot of that. Before the divorce, during, after, making choices based on how they'd look rather than how they felt. He paused. You didn't look wrong to me. You looked like a person, and I needed to talk to a person. Evelyn didn't say anything immediately. She looked out the window at Fifth Avenue, where a Saturday afternoon was doing Saturday afternoon things. A couple walking a large dog that was clearly in charge. A man on a bicycle with a baguette in the basket that seemed inadvisably optimistic. That's a good answer, she said finally. It's not a romantic answer, but it's a good one. Is a romantic answer what you were looking for? No, she said. I'm past the age of romantic answers. I want accurate ones. He smiled at that. She saw it, and something in her expression went slightly less careful. Not by much, but enough. The following 2 weeks moved at the pace of people who were busy, and also without discussion, making room for each other in the margins of being busy. They texted most days, not long conversations, not the sustained performance of interest that Nathan recognized from early dating as a thing that eventually became exhausting. They texted the way people did when contact felt natural rather than managed. She sent him a photo of a sentence a student had written in a journal. My grandma smells like Sundays, with a caption that said, "This is why I teach." He sent her a picture of the chaos at the warehouse when a late delivery had created a domino effect across 3 separate clients, captioned "Actual Logistics." She responded with a single laughing emoji and then, "Do you need help?" I managed 24 9-year-olds simultaneously. Different kind of logistics, he wrote back. Is it though? He thought about it. No. They had coffee again, and then dinner at a Thai place near her apartment that she liked because it was 2 blocks away and always had a table and never played music loud enough to make conversation an effort. The dinner lasted 3 hours. She ordered for both of them without asking, then caught herself and said, "Sorry, is that—" "I didn't ask," and he said, "I trust you." And she looked at him with mild suspicion, as if trust offered that easily was something she was still learning to take at face value. The food was very good. Walking back to where he'd parked, they passed a used bookstore that had its lights on late, books stacked visibly in the window. The disorganized, deliberate kind of stacking that meant someone was proud of the inventory. Evelyn slowed without stopping, looking at the window with the expression of someone exercising restraint. "You want to go in," Nathan said. "It's late," she said. "The lights are on. I have to get home. Emma's with my mom tonight, but I said I'd be back by 10. He looked at his phone. It's 8:43. She looked at the window, at him. "I become a different person in bookstores," she said, as though this were a warning. "I'll risk it." They went in. She was right. She moved through the shelves with a focused energy that was completely different from the deliberate composure she wore in the world. Pulling books out, reading back cover copy with a speed that suggested she'd learned to extract information efficiently, setting some back and tucking others under her arm with the decisiveness of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for, even when she didn't know she was looking for it. She narrated as she went, not really to him, half to herself. "This one's overrated. I've read it twice and I don't know why. Oh, this is the one. I've been trying to find a good copy of this for 2 years. Don't read this unless you want to be furious for a week and then think about it for the rest of your life. Nathan followed and listened and pulled out a book or two of his own, asking her opinions, and she gave them with the directness of someone who considered it a disservice to be vague about books. She spent $32 and left with 4 books. Nathan spent $18 and left with 2, one of which she'd put directly into his hands and said, "You need to read this next, trust me." Outside, she looked at her bag of books and then at him with the slightly sheepish expression of someone who had been exactly as predictable as they warned you they'd be. "I told you," she said. "You were right," he said. "I like that version of you." She went still, briefly. Not long. A second, maybe. "Which version?" "The one that stops exercising restraint." It was a direct thing to say, and he knew it when he said it, and he didn't take it back. She held his gaze for a moment and then looked down at her bag. "I should get home," she said. "Yeah." "Next week," she said. "Sunday. If you're free." "I'm free." She nodded, once, in that efficient way she had, and walked to her car. Sundays became the word for it between them. Not a plan, exactly. More like an understanding that arrived without much negotiation. They fell into it the way you fall into a habit that doesn't feel like a habit yet because it still feels like a choice, though later you'll realize the choice was made quietly, without announcement. Some Sundays they went to groundwork. Some they went to the farmer's market at Easton and walked slowly through the vegetable stalls while Evelyn was opinionated about squash, and Nathan carried the bag and didn't mention that he wasn't sure what half of what she bought was called. Some Sundays they drove out along the Scioto Trail and walked sections of the path where the trees had gone orange and red and were starting to drop, leaving a layer of color on the ground that muffled sound and made the whole world feel slightly muted, like someone had turned a dial. They talked on those walks the way people talk when they're moving, easier, somehow, than sitting still. Less like a conversation and more like thinking out loud in the same direction. Nathan told her about the marriage, more than he'd told anyone in a long time. About Claire, who had been kind and organized and fundamentally misaligned with him in a way that had taken years to see because both of them had kept adjusting to compensate. About the specific loneliness of being unhappy in a relationship and knowing it, but not knowing what to do with the knowing. About the divorce, which had been quiet and civil, and more painful for its quietness. No explosion, no dramatic end, just the long, slow recognition that something had already stopped. "She's remarried," he said, on one of the October walks, leaves coming down around them at the particular speed of early fall. "Has a kid now. I don't feel anything complicated about it anymore. I think for a while I did, and then I just didn't." "What did complicated feel like?" Evelyn asked, not in a therapeutic way, just curious. "Like I was supposed to have gotten somewhere by now and hadn't," he said. "Like everyone else had figured out the sequence and I'd missed a step." "The sequence," she repeated. "You know, marriage, house, kids, the thing you're building, the narrative." "I had the narrative," Evelyn said. "I had all of it. It didn't make me feel like I'd arrived anywhere. It just made me feel busy." She stepped over a root in the path without breaking stride. "The thing I actually wanted, I didn't know I wanted until after it was gone, which is its own kind of education." "What was the thing?" She was quiet long enough that he thought she might not answer. "Someone who was actually paying attention," she said. "Not to the version of me that was useful or impressive or convenient. To the actual version." Nathan didn't say anything. The path curved and the trees thinned and the river appeared at the bottom of a small slope, moving gray and quiet in the October light. "For what it's worth," he said eventually, "you're the easiest person to pay attention to that I've met in a long time." She glanced at him sideways. "I'll take that." "You should," he said. But the first time he met Emma was not planned, which was probably better. It was a Sunday in early November, 3.5 weeks after the mixer, and Nathan and Evelyn had arranged to meet at groundwork at 2 o'clock. What they hadn't arranged was that Evelyn's mother, who usually had Emma on Sunday afternoons, had woken up with a migraine that morning and called at noon. Emma couldn't stay with a grandmother who was in bed with the lights off and a cold cloth on her face. Evelyn called Nathan at 12:30. "I have to be honest with you," she said, and something in her voice was different, tighter, more careful. Not the composed version and not the bookstore version, something in between, someone managing logistics of her own. "Emma's with me today. My mom's sick. I completely understand if you want to reschedule." "I don't," he said. "Nathan, I said—" "I heard you," he said. "I don't want to reschedule. If Emma's comfortable with me being there, I'd like to come. If she's not, I'll leave. That's not a complicated decision." A pause. "She doesn't know who you are." "She'll know I'm your friend," he said. "That's all she needs to know right now." Another pause, longer. "Okay," Evelyn said. 2:00. He brought a book. He wasn't sure why. It wasn't a strategy, just what he did. And carrying a book felt like carrying something familiar in case he needed to be inconspicuous. He arrived at groundwork to find Evelyn and Emma already at a corner table, Emma in a window seat with a sketchbook open in front of her, drawing something with the specific absorption of a child who has decided to be somewhere else mentally while physically present. Evelyn looked up when he walked in. The look lasted just a second, checking, assessing, the same reflex she'd had at table 7, before she moved her bag off the chair beside her. Emma was 9, but looked concentrated in the way some kids do at that age, like they're still putting together a theory of the world and aren't ready to be interrupted. She had Evelyn's dark eyes and her father's coloring, and a bright blue headband she'd clearly put on herself because it was slightly crooked. She didn't look up when Nathan sat down. "Emma," Evelyn said, "this is Nathan. He's a friend of mine." Emma glanced up, made a quick assessment that reminded him of her mother, and went back to drawing. "Hi," she said to the sketchbook. "Hi," Nathan said. He didn't push. He ordered his coffee and sat with Evelyn and let the silence be what it was. After about 10 minutes, without looking up, Emma said, "What kind of book is that?" Nathan looked at the book he'd set on the table. "It's about a man who crosses a bridge in the 1950s, he said. "Actually, it's about a lot of things, but that's how it starts." Emma glanced at it. "Why does he cross the bridge?" "That's kind of the whole question," Nathan said. She seemed to consider this. "Does he find out?" "He finds out something," Nathan said. "I'm not sure it's what he was looking for." Emma looked up fully for the first time. "That happens a lot," she said, with the matter-of-fact authority of someone who had experienced this phenomenon personally. "You look for one thing, and you find a different thing, and sometimes the different thing is better, and sometimes it isn't." "Yeah," Nathan said, "that's exactly it." She studied him for a moment with those dark, measuring eyes. Then she picked up her colored pencil and went back to her drawing. Evelyn, across the table, said nothing. She was looking at her coffee, but the careful set of her shoulders had gone slightly less careful, and Nathan noticed and filed it away and didn't mention it. Emma showed him the drawing before they left. It was a map, a detailed, invented map of a place she'd made up, with labeled regions in the private language, rivers that bent in dramatic arcs, a mountain range along one coast. It was intricate and specific, and clearly the product of a long-running private project. "This is Volundri," she said, pointing to the largest landmass. "I've been building it for 2 years. The language came first, and then I needed somewhere for the people to live." "That's the right order," Nathan said. Emma looked at him. "That's what my mom said." "Your mom is right about most things," Nathan said. Emma considered this with the gravity of a child taking a new data point seriously. "Yeah," she said, after a moment. "She is." November moved through the way November does in Central Ohio, grudgingly, insisting on gray, pulling heat from the world in stages until the cold stopped being a surprise and became just the atmosphere. Nathan and Evelyn kept their Sundays. The coffee shop, the bookstore, the farmer's market when the vendors were still there. He started a habit of cooking on Sundays when they didn't have plans, just for something to do with his hands, and he texted her photos of the results with accurate assessments of their quality. She texted back with opinions. Once she asked what he was making, and he described it, and she said that sounds wrong, and she was right. It was wrong, but he ate it anyway and didn't tell her that. He noticed the things about her that weren't the composed, managed version. The way she got frustrated quietly rather than loudly. A tightening around her eyes. A pause before she spoke. The way she overprepared for things that mattered to her, showing up to their coffee dates with a book and a backup book in case the first one didn't suit her mood. The way she laughed, which was sudden and a little louder than she expected it to be, and which she always looked slightly surprised by, as if it had gotten out before she caught it. He noticed these things and did not say he was noticing them because she was still careful, still moving at a pace she'd set for herself, and he understood that the pace was not reluctance. It was self-knowledge. She had learned what happened when she moved too fast toward something, and she wasn't doing it again. He realized one evening in late November, sitting with a book he hadn't been reading because he kept thinking about a conversation they'd had that afternoon. He was not, in fact, practicing anything. He was not being cautious. He was not being solid and careful and the architect of a rebuilt life. He was a man who looked forward to Sunday the way he used to look forward to nothing in particular, and who had started reading the kinds of books that required more from him than he'd previously been willing to give, and who had on 3 separate occasions bought cartoon cereal without a second thought. He was, without having decided to be, paying attention to someone. He wasn't sure yet what to do with that, but it was there. It was real and warm and a little terrifying, the way real things often were. And he sat with it the way she'd told him to sit with the hard parts of a book, not looking for the resolution yet, just staying in it, seeing where it was going. December arrived the way it always did in Columbus, without asking, dropping temperatures overnight and leaving frost on windshields and the particular smell of cold air that had no other name for it except winter. The city adjusted, people switching to heavier coats, coffee shops filling earlier in the mornings, the general pace of life slowing just slightly, the way it did when the days shortened and the dark came before dinner. Nathan and Evelyn had been seeing each other for nearly 2 months when the first real crack appeared. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday evening in early December, and Evelyn had called him from the school parking lot at 5:30, her voice carrying the flatness of someone who had been managing other people's needs all day and had arrived finally at empty. "I have to cancel Sunday," she said. "Okay," Nathan said. He was sitting at his kitchen table with a work report open in front of him that he hadn't been reading. "Is everything okay?" "Emma has a thing, a school performance. I forgot to put it in the calendar and I double-booked myself." A pause. "I hate when I do that." "It's fine, Evelyn. It's not... I don't want to be the person who keeps canceling. You haven't kept canceling. This is the first time." "I know, but..." She stopped. He heard her exhale, long and slow, the sound of someone releasing a tension that had been held too long. "I've been doing this thing," she said more quietly, "where I check myself. Every time I start to look forward to something with you, I check myself." Nathan set down his pen. "What does checking yourself look like?" "Like asking whether this is sustainable, whether I'm building something on solid ground or on what I want the ground to be." Another pause. "Whether you're going to look at the whole thing one day, me, Emma, the schedule, the complications, and decide it's too much." He was quiet for a moment. He wanted to say "I won't" immediately, but he understood that a quick reassurance wasn't what she was asking for, and that offering one would miss the point entirely. "Have I given you a reason to think that?" he asked. "No," she said. "That's what makes it hard. You're consistent, Nathan. You show up. You don't make promises you don't keep." She said this like it was almost a problem. "I'm not used to that. It's easier to be cautious with someone who's given me reasons." "I understand that," he said, because he did. Caution built on evidence was rational. Caution that had to work against the evidence was something else, a habit that had outlasted the conditions that made it necessary. "Emma's performance is at 7, Evelyn said. "At her school. It's just the class. Nothing formal. She's nervous about it." A pause. "She asked if you were coming." The sentence landed quietly. Nathan took a moment with it. "She asked," he said. "She asked," Evelyn confirmed. "Do you want me to come?" A long pause. "Yes," Evelyn said. "I do." "Then I'll be there," he said. 7 o'clock. Text me the address." She did. And then, "Thank you." Just that. He stared at it for a moment, 2 words that carried the weight of someone who did not say thank you lightly, who reserved it for things that actually cost something, and he understood that what she was thanking him for was not just agreeing to come to a school performance. She was thanking him for not making her regret asking. The Columbus Riverside Elementary School gymnasium smelled like every school gymnasium Nathan had ever been in. Floor wax and gym rubber and something industrial and faintly optimistic. Folding chairs had been set out in rows facing a low stage where a paper backdrop depicted a winter forest, slightly lopsided, clearly assembled by 9-year-olds with too much tape and not enough coordination. Parents clustered in the rows, phones out, everyone angled for the best angle. Evelyn was near the aisle, 3rd row, with a seat saved. She'd worn her caramel wool coat, the one with the replaced button, and her hair was up but deliberately this time. She looked tense in the specific way of a parent waiting for their child to do a hard thing. She saw him come in and some of the tension left her face, quickly replaced by something more guarded, as though she'd let it show for a second before she could stop herself. He sat down next to her. "How's she doing?" "She was very calm about it this morning," Evelyn said. "Which means she's terrified. Emma goes calm when she's terrified. She went calm right before she jumped off the diving board for the first time. Stood up there for 3 minutes, not moving, and then just went. No expression." "She sounds like you," Nathan said. Evelyn looked at him sharply. Then the edge of her mouth moved. "She has more nerve than me." The performance was 20 minutes of 4th graders presenting short pieces they'd written about something they loved. The format was simple, like each child stood at a small podium, read their piece, sat back down. Some were funny and some were earnest, and one boy delivered a passionate defense of breakfast burritos that got the biggest laugh of the evening. Emma was 6th. She walked to the podium without looking at the audience, which Nathan recognized as the 3-minute diving board strategy. She set her paper down with both hands and looked at it for a moment, and he could see from the 3rd row that she was breathing. She read about Volundri. She read about the language she'd built, why she'd built it, the logic of the grammar system, the way the words for weather were all related to the words for emotion, because in Volundri the people understood these things to be the same. She read for 3 minutes with a focus and a precision that was completely her own, not performing for the audience, but presenting something she'd made, something real, the way an architect might show you a building they believed in. When she finished, there was a second of silence before the applause, the kind of silence that happens when an audience is recalibrating. Nathan clapped. He was aware he was clapping harder than was probably socially calibrated, and he didn't adjust. Evelyn was very still beside him. He looked at her, and she was looking at Emma, who had returned to her seat on the stage and was now sitting with her hands folded in her lap, still not looking at the audience, but with the expression of someone who had jumped off the diving board and found the water exactly where they expected it to be. Evelyn's jaw was set in a way that meant she was not going to cry in a school gymnasium, and she was going to succeed, but it was going to require everything she had. Nathan put his hand over hers on the armrest. He didn't squeeze it or make anything of it. He just put it there, and she didn't move her hand, and they sat like that for the rest of the performance. Afterward, Emma found them in the cluster of parents outside the gymnasium. She was carrying her paper in one hand and wore the expression of someone who had assessed the evening and arrived at a provisional verdict. "I messed up the 3rd paragraph," she told Evelyn. "I skipped a sentence." "Nobody noticed," Evelyn said. "I noticed." "Then you know for next time," Evelyn said. "You were wonderful, Em." Emma accepted this with a small nod, then turned to Nathan. "You came," she said. "I said I would," he said. She looked at him with the direct assessment that was entirely her mother's. "Most people say they will," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not most people." Emma considered this. "You said that before," she said. "At the coffee place, when you first met me." She glanced at her mother. "He said he wasn't most people." "He did," Evelyn said, with a tone Nathan couldn't entirely read. "Okay," Emma said, apparently satisfied, and went to find her friend across the room. They got through December in pieces, a school break that took Emma to Portland to visit Daniel for 10 days, which Evelyn managed with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had learned to exist in the silence her daughter left behind. Nathan drove her to dinner the night Emma flew out, and they sat in the restaurant longer than they needed to, not because either of them was avoiding going home, but because the restaurant was warm and the food was good, and being in the middle of a conversation felt better than being at the end of one. She was different those 10 days. Not worse, not broken, just thinner at the edges, the way a person gets when one of the structures holding them up is temporarily absent. She texted Emma every morning and every night, and Emma texted back with updates from Portland that included hand-drawn attachments, small maps, invented words, once a detailed critique of a restaurant Daniel had taken her to that made Evelyn laugh out loud in Nathan's kitchen on a Wednesday evening when he'd made dinner and she'd come over after work. Still in her teaching clothes, a red pen still clipped to the neck of her sweater. It was the first time she'd come to his apartment. She walked through it with the same focused attention she gave bookstores, and he watched her take it in. The clean lines of it, the bookshelves that were organized in a way she later told him was aggressively logical, the lack of anything on the walls except one framed print above the couch, a topographical map of the Appalachian Range that he'd bought from a street market years ago because it looked like a language. "You live carefully," she said, standing in the center of the living room. "I know," he said. "It's not a criticism," she said. "My apartment looks like a controlled explosion in a library." She turned. "I just think there's room for more mess. Controlled mess. The kind that means you've let things in." He cooked pasta, which was genuinely the only thing he could cook reliably, and she sat at the kitchen counter and talked about the things that had gone wrong at school that week. A conflict between two students that had required more diplomacy than most international negotiations, a parent email she'd spent 40 minutes composing in order to say something that was true and necessary and wouldn't land like an attack. "Did it work?" Nathan asked, stirring. "She emailed back and said thank you," Evelyn said, which means either it worked or she hated it and is being polite. 50% success rate, he said. "In parent communication, 50% is excellent," she said. They ate at his kitchen table and afterwards sat with wine he'd bought specifically for the evening and talked until almost 11, when Evelyn looked at her phone and said she should go. She stood and put on her coat, and he walked her to the door, and she stopped there, in the doorway, turning slightly. "This was good," she said. "Not the careful version of good. The real version," said plainly. "It was," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she went up on her toes, very briefly, and kissed him on the cheek, close to the corner of his mouth, but not quite, deliberate and unhurried. And then she was out the door and down the hall, and he stood in his doorway for a moment before closing it. He stood there a little longer than he should have, which was probably all the information he needed. Emma came back from Portland in January in a complicated state, glad to be home, sad about leaving, guilty about the sad, which Evelyn had explained to Nathan was Emma's particular pattern after visits with Daniel. She processed all of it internally, and then it came out sideways, usually as irritability about minor things, a lost pencil, a show she wanted to watch that wasn't loading right, the specific texture of a shirt. Nathan learned this secondhand from Evelyn's texts and understood that he was being informed rather than asked for anything. He did not offer solutions or advice that wasn't requested. He texted back the kinds of responses that meant, "I heard you," without turning it into a thing that needed managing. One Saturday in late January, Evelyn had to run errands, a grocery run, a pharmacy pickup, a library return, and Emma was home from a playdate earlier than expected. There was a brief logistical problem. Evelyn was 20 minutes out, Emma was already at the apartment, and the sitter had gone. She called Nathan because he was 3 blocks away, and because, she said later, it was the first name she thought of. He came over and sat on the living room floor with Emma, who was in the complicated post-Daniel state, and had decided to be building something out of the Lego architecture set spread across the coffee table. She did not ask him to help, and he did not offer. He sat with his phone and a book and let her build. After about 10 minutes of silence, "What are you reading?" "A book about bridges," he said. "Engineering, how they stay up." Emma put a piece on her structure. "How do they?" "Depends on the bridge," he said. "But mostly they transfer force. The weight doesn't just push down. It gets redirected, spread out, so no single point has to hold everything." Emma looked at her Lego structure. "Mine keeps falling on the left side." "Can I see?" She slid it toward him on the coffee table. He looked at it without touching it. "Your base is narrower on the left," he said. "So when you add weight on that side, there's not enough spread. Try widening it out here." He pointed, without touching. She took the base apart and rebuilt it his way, with the focus she brought to everything that mattered to her. Then she added the top section back. It held. She looked at it for a moment, then at him. "You're good at noticing things," she said. "I try," he said. She picked up another piece. "My dad doesn't notice things," she said, with the flat delivery of a child stating a fact they've accepted. "He notices when I'm sad, but not why. Mom says he tries." Nathan said nothing, which was the right answer. "Do you have kids?" Emma asked. "No," he said. "Do you want some?" The question was asked with total guilelessness, the pure curiosity of a 9-year-old who had not yet learned that some questions were complicated. Nathan held it for a moment. "I haven't really thought about it in a long time," he said honestly. "I think I'd like to be part of a kid's life, whether that's being someone's dad or just someone worth knowing. I think that matters more to me than the label." Emma seemed to assess this answer for structural integrity, the way she'd assessed the Lego base. Then she went back to building. When Evelyn came home 15 minutes later, she stopped in the doorway and looked at the two of them. Emma at the coffee table, Nathan on the floor reading his bridge book, Emma's structure standing upright and solid on the table between them. And she stood there a beat longer than she needed to before she said anything. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "We're fine," Emma said, without looking up. Evelyn looked at Nathan. He looked back. Something passed between them that neither named, small, and warm and impossible to put away once it had been there. Quote, February brought the kind of cold that had given up being dramatic about it and just settled in, gray and permanent feeling. The cold of a season that had been going on long enough that everyone had forgotten what the alternative felt like. Nathan and Evelyn had been in each other's lives for almost 4 months, and the thing between them had grown in the way of something that didn't announce itself but had simply become part of the structure. They still hadn't talked about what it was. This was not, Nathan had come to understand, avoidance on either of their parts. It was something more like mutual agreement that the naming of it would change the temperature, and the temperature right now was something neither of them wanted to disturb. But the not naming had started to acquire its own weight, and he noticed it more some days than others. He noticed it on a Sunday in mid-February when they were at groundwork and Evelyn was grading papers at the table. She'd brought them in a manila folder and spread them across the spare chairs and was moving through them with a red pen and an occasional sound of frustration or quiet satisfaction. And he was reading across from her, and the whole thing felt so ordinary and so good that it scared him a little. He noticed it the same week when Marcus came to his apartment for dinner and asked with the directness of someone who had been patient for months, "Are you two together or not?" "We see each other," Nathan said. "That's not an answer." "It's the accurate one." Marcus put down his fork. "Nate, I was wrong about her. I'm telling you I was wrong, which I don't do often, and I'm doing it so you'll understand I'm not saying this from the same place I was at Tilden's." He looked at him. "Are you scared?" Nathan thought about the right answer for a moment. "I think we're both being careful," he said. "Careful," Marcus said. "It's not a bad thing." "No," Marcus said, "but there's a version of careful that becomes its own kind of wall." Nathan didn't argue with that because Marcus, on this particular point, was not wrong. The conversation happened on a Wednesday evening in late February, and like most of the important things between them, it arrived sideways and without preparation. Evelyn had come over again. This had become a thing, Wednesday evenings when Emma had her art class and then went home with Evelyn's mother for dinner. They'd eaten takeout from a Thai place and were sitting on his couch with the television on and not really watching it, which had also become a thing. Evelyn had taken off her shoes and tucked her feet under her, which Nathan had noticed because it was the first time, because it was the kind of thing that meant you were comfortable, and comfort was something she didn't offer carelessly. She was reading. He was reading. The television was talking to itself. Then Evelyn put her book down, face up rather than face down, which was unusual for her. "Can I say something?" she said. It wasn't quite a question. "Yeah," he said. She looked at the television for a moment as if gathering something. "I've been trying to figure out the right way to say this for a couple of weeks," she said. "And I've decided there isn't one, so I'm just going to say it." Nathan set his own book down. He waited. "I'm not just spending time with you anymore," she said. "I've been telling myself I am. Because it felt safer. But I'm not. She looked at him directly then, the way she looked at things she was willing to see clearly. You've become important to me, in a way I didn't plan for and can't manage around anymore. She paused. And that terrifies me. In case you were wondering. The room was quiet except for the television, which someone on was saying something about traffic on I-71. It terrifies me too, Nathan said. She looked at him. You don't look terrified. I'm sitting very still, he said. That's what terrified looks like on me. She searched his face for a moment. He let her. I spent a year after Daniel, she said, telling myself I was fine with not having this. That I had Emma, and I had work, and I had enough, and I was fine. I genuinely was fine. But fine and... She paused, looking for the word full are not the same. He felt the phrase land somewhere precise and specific, the same phrase Dr. Patel had used, said now by someone who had arrived at it from the other direction. He didn't say that. He just held it. I'm afraid of getting this wrong, Evelyn continued. I'm afraid of letting you in and then finding out there was a version of this I didn't see coming, some incompatibility I missed, something I asked of you that you couldn't give, and I have to take Emma through another loss. Her voice remained steady, but something underneath it wasn't. She's already started talking about you like you're permanent. She mentioned you to her teacher. She put you in a drawing she made of her week. She stopped. I didn't ask her to. She just did. Nathan looked at his hands for a moment, then at her. Evelyn, he said, I want to be clear about something. She waited. I'm not here practicing, he said. I'm not here killing time or seeing how this goes in a casual way. I know the difference between those things and this is not those things. He held her gaze. I am aware of what you and Emma are. I'm aware of the weight of it. I'm not scared of the weight. I'm scared of doing something wrong, saying the wrong thing, moving too fast or not fast enough, missing something important. But I'm not scared of you, and I'm not going anywhere because it gets complicated. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. I needed to hear that, she said. I needed to hear it said plainly, not performed. That was as plain as I know how to be. She looked at him. The television said something else about traffic, and neither of them heard it. This is the part where I'd normally pull back, she said. Where I'd get practical and schedule something and create a little distance so I could think. Are you going to? He asked. A long pause, long enough that he noticed the exact texture of the silence. Then, no, she said. I don't think I am. He reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, the way they always were in winter, the way she complained about and never fixed despite owning 4 pairs of gloves. She looked down at their hands and then back up at him. We're doing this, she said. Not a question, a naming, finally. We're doing this, he agreed. She let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for months. Outside, the February cold pressed against the windows. Inside, the television murmured to itself, and the lamp cast a warm circle on the couch where they sat, and Evelyn did not pull back and did not get practical and did not create distance. She stayed, and for Nathan, who had rebuilt his life carefully and solidly and with such attention to not breaking anything again, that was everything. The naming of it changed things, the way naming things always does. Not by making them different, but by making them real in a way that could no longer be managed around. After that Wednesday evening in February, Nathan and Evelyn stopped performing the careful dance of two people who weren't sure what they were to each other and started doing the harder, quieter work of two people who knew. This meant, practically, that certain things shifted. He stopped waiting for her to initiate contact, and she stopped calibrating the frequency of hers. They talked most evenings, sometimes for an hour, and sometimes for 12 minutes because one of them was tired or had a work deadline, or Emma needed help with homework, and the call ended mid-sentence with a quick, "I'll talk to you tomorrow," that carried no anxiety in it, just fact. The ease of it surprised Nathan more than the connection had. He'd expected the connection. He'd felt it at table 7, some version of it, some early shape. He hadn't expected the ease. He'd thought relationships required more maintenance than this, more effort to sustain the warmth. But this one seemed to generate its own heat. You put wood on it occasionally, and it kept going. What also changed was Emma. Not suddenly, Emma did nothing suddenly, which Nathan had come to understand was one of her defining qualities. She moved through new things in stages, processing privately, letting information settle before she acted on it. But over the weeks following February, the stages completed themselves. She started talking to him directly rather than through Evelyn. She started showing him things. New pages of the Volundry maps, a book she'd read and wanted to discuss. A disagreement she'd had with a classmate that she described with the narrative precision of someone who had been composing the account in her head all day. The first time she called him by name unprompted, not in response to something, just Nathan, look at this. He registered it and did not make it a thing, which was exactly right, and which Evelyn noticed and said nothing about until later that night when she texted him. She called you by name today. She doesn't do that until she's decided about a person. He read it twice. Then, decided what? That you're worth knowing. He set his phone down and sat with that for a minute. Then he picked it back up. That means a lot. I know, she wrote back. It should. Spring arrived in Columbus the way it always did. Tentatively, in fits, warm one week, and then a cold snap that reminded everyone that March was not to be trusted. The trees along the Scioto came back slowly, then quickly, the way trees did, and by April the path they walked on Sundays had gone green at the edges, and the light had the particular quality of late afternoon in spring, long and golden, lasting longer than you expected it to. They walked almost every Sunday now, the three of them, Nathan, Evelyn, and Emma, who walked between them when she felt like it and ranged ahead when she didn't, stopping to examine things that caught her attention with the thoroughness of a scientist in the field. A strange piece of bark. A bird she couldn't identify and needed to look up. A section of the path where the mud had dried in a specific pattern that she said looked like the coastline of Volundry's northern continent. Does it? Nathan asked, looking at the mud. Emma crouched down and held her sketchbook up next to it, comparing. Close enough, she said, and took a photo with Evelyn's phone. These walks had a quality Nathan had not experienced before. Not excitement, not the heightened alertness of something new, but a deep, almost surprising contentment, the kind that came from repetition and familiarity rather than novelty. He noticed the same thing most Sunday evenings when dinner happened at Evelyn's apartment, which had become the default. Evelyn cooking something she'd been thinking about all week, with the focused pleasure of a person who cooked the way she did everything else she cared about. Emma at the kitchen table doing homework or drawing, Nathan sitting nearby, occasionally drafted into service for chopping vegetables or testing whether something needed more salt. He was bad at both. Evelyn corrected his knife technique on 3 separate occasions, and the third time Emma looked up from her homework and said deadpan, "She's corrected you before." And Evelyn said, "Emma." And Emma went back to her homework with a small smile that was entirely her mother's. These evenings were the best part of his week. He knew that and didn't feel the need to qualify it. The first real difficulty arrived in April, and it arrived through Daniel. Emma had been scheduled to go to Portland for spring break, a week with her father, flights already booked. 3 days before she was supposed to leave, Daniel called Evelyn to say that Stephanie was pregnant, that there was a complication requiring monitoring, that this wasn't the best week for a visit. He would pay to rebook the flights. He was sorry. Evelyn took the call in her bedroom with the door closed. Nathan was in the living room with Emma, who was working on a new section of the Volundry language. She'd decided to add a formal dialect for legal proceedings, which had required developing about 30 new words, and who could not hear the conversation but who had a 9-year-old's precise radar for the emotional temperature of a space. She'd gone quiet about 2 minutes into Evelyn's call. By the time Evelyn came back into the living room 10 minutes later, Emma had put her sketchbook away. "Your dad called," Evelyn said with the careful tone of a woman who had practiced this kind of delivery for 5 years. "I know," Emma said. "Stephanie's having some complications with the pregnancy, so he'd like to reschedule your visit." Emma looked at the table. She had a pencil in her hand she was turning end over end, a habit she had when she was processing. "Is Stephanie okay?" "She will be," Evelyn said. "They just need to be careful for a while." Emma turned the pencil 3 more times. "Okay," she said. Her voice was neutral in the specific way of a child who has decided not to perform the feeling they're having. "When would we reschedule?" "We'll figure that out with your dad." "Okay," Emma said again. She picked her sketchbook back up, but she wasn't drawing. She was looking at the page without seeing it. Nathan stayed where he was. He did not fill the silence with reassurances or enthusiasm or the particular adult discomfort that turned a child's hard moment into something that needed to be fixed right now. He stayed present and quiet and let Emma have the moment at whatever volume she needed it to be. After about 5 minutes, Emma said, still looking at her sketchbook, "It's not his fault." "No," Nathan said, "it isn't." "I know he tries," she said. This was the phrase Evelyn had taught her. He understood, not as a consolation, but as a frame, something true that allowed a more complicated truth to coexist with it. "Yeah," Nathan said. "It's still—" Emma started, then stopped. Started again. "It still feels bad." "I know," Nathan said. "It's allowed to feel bad." She looked at him then, and for a second she looked very young, not the precise, composed Emma who built languages and analyzed coastlines and delivered verdicts on people with the efficiency of a veteran judge, but just a kid who was disappointed in a way she hadn't yet figured out how to hold neatly. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Okay." Evelyn was standing in the kitchen doorway. Nathan met her eyes briefly. She held his gaze for a second and then looked away, but he'd seen what was there. The gratitude, the relief, the particular exhaustion of a parent who is also a person and cannot always be both at the same time. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in front of her and said, very quietly, "She holds so much." "She does," Nathan said. "Daniel loves her," Evelyn said. "I believe that. I need to believe it for her sake. But love and consistency are not the same thing, and she's starting to understand that, and I can't. I can't protect her from understanding it." "You shouldn't," Nathan said. "It'll serve her." "I know," Evelyn said. "It still hurts to watch." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, the way he had in the gymnasium, simple, present, not trying to fix the unfixable. She turned her hand over and held his. "Spring break," she said after a while. "We have a week and no plan." "We could go somewhere," Nathan said. She looked at him. "We?" "If you want," he said. "The three of us. Somewhere Emma would like." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, looking at her tea. "She's never gone anywhere with someone I was with," she said. "Not as something intentional." "I know," Nathan said. "We don't have to." Another pause. "She'd like it," Evelyn said slowly, "if it were the right place." She looked up. She's been obsessed with natural history museums. The kind with the big collections, fossils, geology. She wants to see real things, not replicas. "Chicago," Nathan said. "The Field Museum. It's 4 hours. We could drive, get a hotel, take 2 days." Evelyn looked at him. "You've been to the Field Museum?" "Once. For a work conference, which meant I spent one afternoon there and have wanted to go back properly ever since." She was quiet for a moment, doing the thing she did when she was measuring something against something else. Then, "I'll ask her," she said. Emma's response, delivered the next morning over cereal, was, "The Field Museum has a Sioux, the original T-Rex. Well, she's been moved to a separate space now, but the cast is still in the main hall." She considered her cereal. "I want to see Sue." "Then we'll see Sue," Nathan said. Emma looked at him across the table with the measuring look. "You don't have to do this because you feel bad about Dad," she said. "I don't feel bad about your dad," Nathan said. "I want to go to Chicago. The museum has a whole section on ancient Egypt that I've been meaning to see properly." Emma regarded this information. "Ancient Egypt is in the same wing as the Americas collection," she said. "We could do both in one day if we're efficient." "I think we can be efficient," Nathan said. "Mom isn't efficient in museums," Emma said. "She reads every single placard." "Emma," Evelyn said from the counter. "It's true," Emma said. "It takes 3 times as long." "I also read every placard," Nathan said. "So between the two of us, we'll probably need 2 days." Emma looked between them. Then the smallest smile, brief, decisive. "Fine," she said. 2 days. Jet. They drove to Chicago on a Thursday morning in early April. Emma in the back seat with her sketchbook and headphones. Evelyn in the passenger seat with a coffee she'd made at home and brought in a travel mug, Nathan driving. The weather was gray but not raining. The highway flattened out north of Columbus and went straight through farmland that was just beginning to turn, the fields showing the first pale green of the season. Emma fell asleep somewhere around Marion, and Evelyn turned the music down, and they drove in a quiet that was full rather than empty, the kind that didn't require filling. "I haven't done this," Evelyn said after a while. "Driven to Chicago?" "Taken a trip with someone," she said. "Like this, as a unit. How does it feel?" She looked out at the flat farmland going past. "Normal," she said, with a note of surprise in it. "That's the thing. It feels normal. It should feel bigger." "Maybe normal is the bigger thing," Nathan said. She turned to look at him, then back out the window. "That's a good answer," she said. "I'm going to think about that." He smiled and drove. The Field Museum was everything Emma had prepared for, and Nathan had half remembered. She moved through the dinosaur hall with a focused intensity that cleared a path. Other visitors seemed to sense instinctively that stepping in front of this particular child would be unwise. She stood in front of Sue's cast in the main hall for a long time without saying anything, just looking up, and Evelyn stood beside her and let her look. And Nathan stood just behind them and looked too, and the three of them existed in that enormous room together in a silence that held its own specific gravity. "She was 40 years old when she died," Emma said eventually. "How do they know?" Nathan asked. "Growth rings in the bone," Emma said, "like a tree." She looked up at the articulated jaw, the size of it. "She survived more than the others in her species. Most of them died younger." "What does that tell you?" Nathan asked. Emma was quiet for a moment. "That lasting longer isn't luck," she said. "It's something." Evelyn made a sound beside him, very quiet. He didn't look at her. That evening they ate deep dish pizza at a table too small for 3 people, which meant their elbows kept touching, and Emma ended up with sauce on her sleeve, and the whole thing was loud and slightly chaotic and exactly right. Emma had a long and detailed theory about Chicago-style pizza being objectively superior to New York-style that she had apparently been developing since she'd read about the debate in a book, and she presented it with the confidence of someone who has done the research and arrived at conclusions. "You can't have a debate about something that's a preference," Evelyn said. "You can if you support the preference with evidence," Emma said. "The evidence is subjective." "The construction is not," Emma said. "Deep dish holds the structural integrity longer. New York style is engineered for speed, not quality. It's a delivery mechanism, not food." Evelyn looked at Nathan. "I didn't teach her that," she said. "I can tell," he said. "She came to it herself." Emma looked between them with the slightly suspicious expression she wore when adults were agreeing about her in a way she wasn't entirely sure about. The hotel had 2 rooms. Evelyn had booked it, 2 adjoining rooms which Nathan had not asked about, and which Evelyn had arranged with the same matter-of-fact efficiency she brought to everything. Emma had the small room to herself, which she had declared on arrival to be actually very good, because she had a window that looked toward the lake. The second day in the museum, Evelyn read every placard, as predicted, and Nathan read most of them, and Emma moved ahead and circled back with updates and corrections and observations, and they closed the place at 5 o'clock and stood outside in the lake wind that cut right through a spring jacket, all 3 of them slightly dazed in the particular way of people who have put a lot into their eyes and need time for it to settle. "I need to go home and sleep for approximately 1 year," Evelyn said. "I need to come back," Emma said. "There are 3 more halls I didn't finish." "We can come back," Nathan said. Emma looked at him. Something in the way she looked, direct, assessing, the measure she reserved for things she was deciding the weight of. Then, "Okay," she said. Simple. Settled. Like a decision she'd been working toward and had now made. They drove home the next morning under better sky, the sun out for the first time, the farmland catching it differently than it had 2 days ago, greener, more convinced of itself. What came after Chicago was less like a change than like a completion. The shape of things had been forming for months. The Sundays, the dinners, The school performances, the conversations in parking lots and on walking paths and across kitchen tables. And Chicago was simply the moment the shape became visible from the outside as well as the inside. Emma stopped putting Nathan in a category and started treating him as a fact of her life, the way she treated other facts she'd accepted: her school, her neighborhood, her mother's particular habits, the ongoing project of Velundri. He showed up at her school science fair in May, and she introduced him to her teacher with, "This is Nathan," and nothing more, because nothing more was needed. He was there. That was sufficient. He and Evelyn argued for the first time in June about something so logistically specific, it was almost funny in retrospect. A miscommunication about plans that resulted in both of them being frustrated and neither of them handling it well. Evelyn going quiet in the way she did when she was managing something internally, and Nathan pressing too hard when he should have given her room, and the whole thing sitting between them for 2 awkward days before Evelyn called him on a Tuesday morning and said plainly, "I was unfair. I shut down instead of talking, and that's not who I want to be with you. I pushed when I should have waited," he said. "That's on me." "We can both be right about this," she said. "Yeah," he said, "we can." They were fine by that evening. The argument had not broken anything. This was, Nathan thought afterward, its own kind of evidence. Not that they didn't have friction, but that the friction didn't corrode the thing underneath it. He filed this away as important. He'd been in a relationship where every conflict felt like a structural threat. This didn't feel like that. This felt like two people who disagreed about something and then worked it out, which was just what people did. Summer moved through in the way of summers that are full. Emma's school letting out in June, which changed the rhythms of everything. Evelyn's schedule opening up and also filling differently, with the particular busyness of a teacher on break who suddenly had the freedom to do things and wasn't quite sure how to inhabit it. Emma went to a 2-week art camp and came back with a portfolio of work and strong opinions about watercolor versus gouache. She had a summer birthday in August, and Nathan came to the party. A small one, 7 friends from school, cake that Evelyn had made herself with the earnest imperfection of someone who did not claim to be a baker, slightly lopsided, iced in Emma's requested colors, which were blue and gold. Emma was 10. She stood at the end of the table and looked at the cake with an expression of satisfied assessment, and then looked around the table at the people she'd chosen to have there, and Nathan was among them, at the end of the table, and she looked at him for a moment the way she sometimes did, measuring, deciding, and then she smiled at him. Just at him. For no particular reason except that he was there and she was glad. He felt that smile somewhere he couldn't name and wouldn't have tried to. That fall, a year after Tilden's, Evelyn's mother had a minor stroke. It was not severe. She recovered. She came home. She would be fine. But for 2 weeks in October, the center of their world shifted as Evelyn divided herself between Emma and her mother and work and the specific logistics of a family crisis that required everyone to be slightly more than they were normally asked to be. Nathan showed up without being asked to. He picked Emma up from school 3 times when Evelyn was at the hospital. He sat in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours on a Tuesday afternoon, reading a book and answering emails so that Evelyn could be with her mother without worrying about the logistics of the world outside. He didn't frame any of this as a thing he was doing. He didn't keep a ledger. He just showed up, the way he'd been showing up since October of the previous year, because showing up was the only language he'd ever really trusted. Afterward, when things had settled and Evelyn's mother was home and resting and the worst of it had passed, Evelyn sat across from him at his kitchen table. They'd had dinner at his apartment, the pasta, which had become their reset meal, the thing they made when they needed to be somewhere familiar. And she held her wine with both hands and looked at him for a long moment. "You were there," she said. "All of it. You were just there." "Where else would I be?" he said. She shook her head, not disagreeing. "Something else." "I keep waiting," she said. "For what?" "For the thing," she said. "The thing where I find out what this costs, where the bill comes." She paused. "With Daniel, every good period had a bill attached. You'd get 6 good months, and then something you'd been missing would surface, and you'd realize the good months were a loan, not a gift." Nathan looked at her carefully. "Is that what this feels like?" "No," she said. That's what I'm telling you. It doesn't feel like that. And I don't entirely know what to do with that yet. You could just let it be what it is, he said. She looked at him. Then she laughed, quiet and real, the sudden kind that surprised her. You make it sound simple. I know it isn't, he said, but I think the complicated version and the simple version are pointing at the same place. She looked at her wine, then at him. Yeah, she said. I think you're right. Outside, October was doing its October things, going dark early, pressing cold against the windows, dropping the first real leaves of the season onto the parking lot below. Inside, the kitchen was warm, and the pasta was finished, and Emma was at her grandmother's for the evening, and Evelyn was sitting across from him in his carefully built life, filling it with the specific, irreplaceable weight of herself. He thought about what Dr. Patel had said, what felt now like a lifetime ago. Solid isn't the same as full. He looked at Evelyn across the table and thought, this is what full is. It was nothing like what he would have drawn if you'd asked him to draw it. It was more complicated and more ordinary and more real. It was a 9, now 10-year-old who had taught him the word for rain in an invented language. It was arguments that resolved without destroying anything. It was hospital waiting rooms and lopsided birthday cakes and 4 hours in a bookstore on a late Tuesday night. It was a woman who had brought her own coffee to a wine bar and read the same book 4 times and each time paid a different price for it. It was full, completely, imperfectly, stubbornly full. And Nathan Reed, who had rebuilt his life carefully and solidly and with great attention to what he was protecting it from, understood that the thing he had most needed to protect it for had been sitting across from him at table 7 all along. The 2nd October came around the way 2nd Octobers do. Familiar in its bones, recognizable in the way the light changed and the leaves came down and the air carried that particular smell of cold beginning, but different in the way that the same season is always different when you're living it from a different place inside yourself. Nathan noticed it on a Sunday morning when he was making coffee in his apartment and looked out the window at the parking lot below where a single maple had gone completely red overnight, the kind of red that was almost aggressive, announcing itself. And he thought about the 1st October, about Tilden's and the string lights, and the woman with her own coffee in a wine bar. And the distance between then and now felt both enormous and like nothing at all, like crossing a room and turning around to find the room was bigger than you thought. He had been thinking about the ring for 6 weeks, not in an anxious way, at least not entirely, more in the way he thought about logistics problems at work, turning something over from different angles, looking for the actual constraint, the real variable. He'd taken the ring out of the small velvet box at the back of his closet twice just to look at it, which he knew was a strange thing to do. And he'd done it anyway because it made the idea more real, and he needed it to be real before he could trust himself to act on it. The ring had belonged to his grandmother on his mother's side. A simple thing, yellow gold with a small oval stone, unpretentious, the kind of jewelry that was beautiful because it had lasted rather than because it was trying to impress. His mother had given it to him at Christmas 2 years ago, before Evelyn, when he was still in the carefully rebuilt life. And she'd said, over a glass of wine in her kitchen in Dayton, I'm not giving it to you with a deadline. I'm giving it to you because it belonged to a woman who wore it for 40 years, and I think it deserves to be worn again. He'd put it in the back of his closet and thought about it occasionally the way you thought about things you weren't ready for yet. Now he took it out, and it fit inside his palm, and he looked at it in the October morning light from the window, and he thought, yes. Not dramatically, not with a rush of certainty that felt like a movie, just yes plainly, the way you said yes to something that had been true for a while, and you'd simply gotten around to saying it out loud. The question was, how? He thought about it for 3 more weeks before he talked to anyone, and the person he talked to was not Marcus. Marcus would make it into a production, would have suggestions involving restaurant reservations and a string quartet. But Emma. This was not the original plan. The original plan was to ask Evelyn simply and privately, somewhere that meant something to both of them, no audience. But in the 3rd week of October, Emma had come to his apartment on a Saturday while Evelyn was at a parent-teacher conference that had run long, and they were eating sandwiches at his kitchen table when Emma said, without preamble, the way she always said things she'd been composing for a while, "Are you going to marry my mom?" Nathan put down his sandwich. Emma was looking at him with the direct measurement that he had come, over the past year, to understand was her most honest mode. Not challenging, not demanding, just asking a real question and expecting a real answer. "I'm thinking about asking her," he said. Emma looked at him for a moment. "Thinking about or planning to?" "Planning to," he said. "When the time is right." "When's the time right?" "That's what I'm working out," he said. Emma picked up her sandwich and took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. This was her processing mode, eating or drawing or doing something with her hands while the internal machinery ran. He waited. "She gets scared," Emma said, finally. "Mom, about things not lasting. She doesn't show it a lot, but she gets scared." She looked at him. "She's not scared of you, but she might be scared of the question, just so you know." "I know," Nathan said. "Thank you for telling me." "It's not going to make her say no," Emma said, with the authority of someone who had done the analysis. "She just might need a second." "I'll give her as many seconds as she needs," he said. Emma nodded, satisfied. Then, "Is it going to be somewhere good?" the asking. "I think so." "Where?" he told her. Emma looked at the table, then out the window, then back at him. Something in her face did the thing he'd seen it do occasionally. The composed surface thinning slightly, letting something underneath show through. "That's good," she said. "That's really good." She paused. "She's going to cry." "I know," he said. "She hates crying in front of people." "I know that too." "But she'll do it anyway," Emma said. "When it's real, she can't stop herself." She took another bite of her sandwich. She cried at the end of a documentary about migratory birds last spring. She was very embarrassed. Nathan laughed. He couldn't help it. It came out sudden and full, and Emma looked at him and then smiled. The real version, the one that was entirely her own, not Evelyn's and not Daniel's, but something she'd arrived at herself. "You should probably know," Emma said, with a careful tone that meant she was about to say something she'd been holding, "that I want this. In case you were wondering if it was okay with me, it's okay with me." He looked at her. 10 years old and sitting at his kitchen table and saying the most precise and generous thing anyone had said to him in years, said plainly, without ceremony, because she had decided it was true, and she was done not saying it. "Thank you, Emma," he said, and meant it in the full weight of the words. She shrugged, going practical again, the moment folded away. "You should still find somewhere good," she said. "The place matters." "I found the place," he said. It was a bookstore, not groundwork, not the walking path, not the wine bar where it had all started, though any of those would have meant something. It was a used bookstore on the near east side of Columbus called Hartwell and Sons, that had been in the same building since 1971 and smelled like paper and old binding and the particular warmth of a place that had been inhabited by readers for longer than most of the readers had been alive. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, wooden floors that creaked with conviction, a back room with armchairs that nobody sat in because they were filled with books too, towers of them stacked on the seats with the casual confidence of a store that had run out of shelves and decided this was fine. Nathan had found it in October, 3 weeks before he planned anything. He'd been driving back from a work meeting in the east suburbs and passed it by accident, the hand-painted sign in the window, the stacks visible from the street, and something made him stop, which he didn't do normally, which was its own kind of information. He went in. He walked through the shelves for 40 minutes and bought 2 books and stood at the back of the store near the armchairs and thought, here. He didn't analyze it. He just knew. The store was open late on Fridays. He'd confirmed this. He'd also confirmed in a conversation with the woman who ran the store, a 60-something woman named Ruth, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and seemed genuinely unbothered by the chaos of her own inventory, that it was fine to browse after hours if he called ahead. Ruth had looked at him with the perceptive attention of a woman who had spent 40 years watching people come into her store with things on their minds and said, "Special occasion?" "Hopefully," Nathan said. "Good enough for me," Ruth said. "Friday evenings after 7 it quiets down. Come then." He told Evelyn he wanted to show her a bookstore he'd found. This was not a lie. She received it without suspicion because it was not suspicious. They went to bookstores. This was a thing they did. She wore her caramel coat, the one with the slightly wrong button, which she'd had resoled now, the button replaced with a proper match, though she hadn't noticed yet that Nathan had noticed the change. She brought coffee in a travel mug because she always brought coffee, and they drove to the east side on a Friday evening in late October with the windows up and the heat on and the radio playing something low that neither of them listened to. "Where is it?" she asked, watching the streets. "Few more blocks," he said. "I haven't been in this part of the east side in a while," she said. "There used to be a good Vietnamese place somewhere near here. Emma and I came with my mom a few years ago." "Fans," Nathan said. "It's still there, 2 blocks north." She looked at him. "You know that?" "I looked it up," he said, "in case you wanted to go after." She held his gaze for a second with an expression he had catalogued over the past year, the one she made when he did the quiet, particular thing, the thing that meant he'd been paying attention, that he'd filed something small away and brought it out again at the right moment. She always looked at him like this for just a second, and then she looked away, but the second was visible, and he saw it every time. "After what?" she said. "After the bookstore," he said. She accepted this and looked back out the window, and he drove the last 2 blocks with his hands very steady on the wheel and his heart doing something that was not quite its normal rhythm. Hartwell & Sons was lit warm inside, the windows gold against the dark street. Nathan had called Ruth that afternoon, and she'd said the last customer usually left by 7:15, and she'd be in the back doing inventory. He and Evelyn arrived at 7:20. The bell over the door rang when they pushed it open. Ruth, at the counter, looked up and nodded at Nathan with the contained expression of someone who was not going to make this into a thing. Evelyn walked in and stopped inside the doorway the way she always stopped in bookstores. A pause, a breath, an inventory taken. Her eyes went to the shelves, the floor, the towers of books on the armchairs at the back. She turned slowly in place. "Nathan," she said. "I know," he said. How have I never been in here?" "I don't know," he said, "but it's here." She moved toward the shelves the way she always did, focused, purposeful, the bookstore version of herself, the one that dropped the composure. She pulled out a paperback near the door, read the back, set it down, moved to the next shelf. Her fingers ran along the spines in a gesture he'd watched a dozen times and still found specific to her. Not browsing, really, but touching, making contact with the inventory the way some people made contact with a new place by pressing their hands to the wall. He followed. He let her go through 2 shelves. He waited until she was in the 3rd aisle back near the poetry section, which she lingered in because she always lingered in poetry, and the light was good there, a standing lamp with a warm bulb that made the whole aisle amber. "Evelyn," he said, "there's a first edition of something back here, I think." She was looking at a shelf. "Evelyn." She turned at the tone of it, turned fully, and looked at him, and he was already down on one knee on the wooden floor of Hartwell & Sons, with its 40 years of creaking history, and he had the small velvet box open in his hand, and the ring his grandmother had worn for 4 decades caught the amber light of the standing lamp, and it was the simplest, most honest thing he'd ever held. She stood very still. "I know the timing of things," he said, "and I know you know how I feel about you, and I know neither of us is the type for speeches." His voice was steady, which surprised him because the rest of him was not. "But I want to say this out loud, in a place that suits you, so as we can both remember I said it properly." She was watching him with the direct, uncalculating gaze of someone who has stopped managing their own reaction. "You changed what full meant for me," he said. "Before you, I thought I'd built something solid, and that was enough. You taught me the difference, not by telling me, just by being someone worth paying attention to." He paused. "Emma taught me too. She taught me that the things worth building take time, and they take honesty, and they are allowed to be imperfect as long as they're real." He held the ring up. "I want to be your family, officially, permanently, with all the complications and the school schedules and the arguments we'll have, and the pasta I will never cook as well as I think I can." He heard her make a sound that was not quite a laugh. "I love you, Evelyn. Marry me." The store was quiet. Somewhere in the back, Ruth was doing inventory with the patient discretion of a woman who had seen a great deal of life come through her door and knew when to stay out of the way. Evelyn stood in the amber light in the poetry aisle of a used bookstore that had been on this corner since 1971, and her jaw was set, and her eyes were bright, and Emma had been exactly right. She couldn't stop it, not when it was real. She pressed her lips together once, briefly, like she was trying, and then gave up trying. "You practiced that," she said. "A little," he said. "How long did you practice?" 3 weeks, he said, "and it's still not exactly what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant," she said. Her voice wasn't entirely steady. "You meant all of it?" "I did." She looked at the ring, her grandmother's ring, he'd told her once, and she'd forgotten, and now she remembered, and he could see it register. She looked at it for a long moment, the small, oval stone, the gold worn smooth on the bottom where it had been worn for 40 years. "Yes," she said, not loudly, not dramatically, just yes, plainly, the way she said the true things, without ceremony, because they were true and she'd been done not saying them for a while. He stood up. She stepped forward and he put the ring on her hand and she looked at it on her finger. Not the way people looked at rings in photographs, tilting it to catch light for an audience that wasn't there, but just looked at it, seriously. The way she looked at things she was deciding the weight of. "It fits," she said. "I guessed," he said. "I looked at a ring you wear on the same finger on your right hand and guessed." She looked at him. "You measured by looking." "You're a logistics problem," he said. "I pay attention to measurements." She laughed. The sudden kind, the one that surprised her, the one she'd never quite learned to catch before it got out. It filled the amber aisle of Hartwell and Sons, and Ruth, in the back room, heard it and smiled without looking up from her inventory. Evelyn put her hand against his face and looked at him from a very close distance, the way you looked at something you wanted to see accurately. 3 years, she said. "You know that? It's 3 years since that terrible mixer." "Terrible is strong," he said. "I got a very good outcome." The chalkboard said, "Great things start with a hello," she said. It did. And someone added or a restraining order underneath. "That was already there when I arrived," he said, "so I can't take credit." She pressed her forehead briefly to his shoulder. Not a collapse, just a moment, a breath, something set down. Then she straightened. "I want to call Emma," she said. "She already knows," Nathan said. Evelyn pulled back and looked at him. She knew. "She asked me, actually, 3 weeks ago, whether I was going to ask you." Evelyn stared at him. "She asked you?" "She wanted to know if it was happening and when, and she told me you'd need a second, and she said the place mattered." He paused. "She said to find somewhere good." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she looked around the amber aisle, at the shelves of books, at the lamp, at the wooden floor, at the place that had been here for 50 years waiting for the right moment to be used. "She would approve," Evelyn said softly. "I think so," he said. She took out her phone and called her daughter. Emma picked up on the second ring. "Well?" she said, no preamble, direct. "Yes," Evelyn said. A pause. Then Emma, in a voice that was controlled for approximately 1 second before it wasn't. Okay, good." Another pause. "Is it the right place?" Evelyn looked around the bookstore. At Nathan. "It's the right place, Em." "Okay," Emma said, and then, quietly, without the armor of irony she usually carried, "I'm really glad, Mom." Evelyn's jaw went tight. She was not going to cry twice in one evening in front of people. She was going to succeed. She pressed her lips together and succeeded, barely. "Me too, baby," she said. They did go to Fans afterward, as Nathan had planned. They sat in a corner booth and ordered things Evelyn remembered from years ago, and the food was exactly as she remembered it, which was a minor mercy because not everything you returned to was the same. They ate and talked about nothing important and everything important, the way you did when life had just done something large and you needed a meal to bring it back to scale. She kept looking at the ring while they talked, not showing it off. There was no one to show it to. It was a quiet Friday night, the restaurant mostly empty. Just looking at it the way she'd looked at her coffee mug the first night, both hands around something warm, checking that it was still there. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You've been asking me things for 3 years," she said. "I don't see why you'd stop now." The echo of the first night landed between them, and she heard it, and something in her expression went briefly unguarded. A small open thing, there and gone. "When did you know?" he asked. "That this was real?" She thought about it. Not long. She'd thought about it before, he could tell. "Chicago," she said, "in the museum, standing in front of that dinosaur. You didn't do anything particular. You were just there. And I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like, not fireworks, just someone standing next to you who means it." "Means what?" "Being there," she said. "Some people are physically present and somewhere else entirely. You're never somewhere else." He held that. "For me, it was earlier," he said. "First night, honestly." She raised an eyebrow. "First night." "I knew something was happening," he said. "I didn't know what, but I drove home and I read for 4 hours, and when you texted, I was already awake." "I texted because I couldn't sleep," she said. "I know," he said. "Same reason." She looked at the ring again. "We wasted a lot of time being careful," she said. "I don't think so," he said. "I think we built it right. The careful part was the foundation." She considered this. "That's something a logistics manager would say." "It's also true," he said. "Yeah," she said. "It is." They were married this following June, on a Saturday that arrived with the particular confidence of a day that had been planned for correctly. Warm without being aggressive, with a light breeze and the kind of sky that didn't require commentary. The ceremony was small. Evelyn had been clear about this from the beginning. Small, real, no performance. 22 people in a garden at a historic inn on the north side of Columbus. An officiant who had been recommended by a colleague, white chairs and simple flowers, and the whole thing over in 40 minutes because neither of them had wanted the ceremony to outlast its own sincerity. Emma was the maid of honor, which was not a title Emma had any particular feeling about, but she'd worn the blue dress Evelyn had asked her to, and she'd stood at the front with the focused solemnity of someone taking a role seriously. And when Evelyn walked toward Nathan across the grass, Emma was the one standing closest to him, which had not been choreographed and which both of them noticed. Marcus stood beside Nathan and had been, for once in his life, nearly speechless all morning, which was its own kind of gift. He'd pulled Nathan aside before the ceremony and said, voice lower than usual, "I'm going to say it one more time, and then I'm never going to say it again." "Say what?" Nathan said. "I was wrong, at Tilden's. I was completely wrong." "I know," Nathan said. "I need to say it, okay? I need to say it so we can close the ledger." "Ledger's closed, Marcus." She's... Marcus gestured vaguely. "She's exactly right for you, and I almost talked you out of sitting down." "You didn't," Nathan said, but I almost did." "Almost doesn't count," Nathan said. "That's the whole lesson." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he straightened Nathan's collar, which didn't need straightening, just needed something to do. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." The vows were not elaborate. They'd written them together over 2 evenings at Evelyn's kitchen table, not as a romantic exercise, but as a practical one, the way they did most things, with honesty and a willingness to say when something rang false. Evelyn had crossed out Nathan's first draft of the second paragraph and said, "This sounds like a card." And he'd said, "It's a vow. What's it supposed to sound like?" And she'd said, "Like you." And he'd gone back and written it until it sounded like him. What he said, standing across from her in the June garden with 22 people and one specific 10-year-old watching. "I promise to show up, not just for the events and the milestones, but for the ordinary days which I have learned from you are where the actual life is. I promise to pay attention, to you and to Emma and to what you both need, even when I don't get it right the first time. I promise to stay in it when it's hard, because I know what it cost both of us to get here, and I don't take lightly what it means that we did." He paused. "I love you in a way that makes me better at being a person. I don't know how to say that more precisely. I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Evelyn looked at him the whole time he spoke. She did not look down or away. She held his gaze with the direct, exact attention she'd given him since the first night. The look that was not about managing or protecting, but about actually seeing. What she said, "I spent a long time thinking that safety and love were different things. That if something felt safe, it probably wasn't love. And if it was love, it probably came with a cost I couldn't afford. You showed me they didn't have to be different. You were safe from the beginning." She paused. "I didn't know what to do with that for a long time. I'm sorry it took me a while." A small sound from somewhere in the audience. "I love who you are to me, and I love who you are to Emma, and I know the difference between someone performing those things and someone meaning them." Her voice was steady. She'd prepared for this. She was going to make it all the way through. "I choose you. Not because you're perfect. You're not. The pasta thing is genuinely a concern." There was a small laugh from the audience. Emma's the loudest. "But because you are real, and you are present, and you are mine. And I am yours." Emma, standing 3 feet away, looked at the sky for a moment with the expression of someone exercising extraordinary discipline over their own face. She did not cry. She had told Nathan, in the car on the way to the inn, that she was not going to cry at the wedding because she thought public crying was an inefficient way to process emotion. She lasted until approximately the second exchange of rings, at which point she gave up quietly and without making it into a thing, and looked at the grass until she was done. What came after was not a fairy tale. It was a life, which is harder and better than a fairy tale in all the ways that matter. They moved into a larger apartment in Clintonville 6 weeks after the wedding, a place with a third bedroom for Emma and a study for Evelyn, and enough kitchen counter space for 2 people who both had opinions about how a kitchen should function. The move was chaotic in the specific way of all moves, involving 2 broken boxes, a bookshelf that refused to fit through the doorway, until Nathan and Marcus spent 45 minutes determining which screws to remove, and a disagreement about where the couch should go that was resolved, after 20 minutes, by Emma standing in the center of the room and pointing. "There. The light hits better." She was right. They put it there. Emma started 5th grade that fall and had a teacher she didn't immediately trust, which she processed by being critical about the classroom's organizational system, which Evelyn listened to patiently and Nathan listened to carefully, and which resolved itself by October when the teacher assigned a creative writing project, and Emma produced 12 pages about Velundry, and the teacher wrote at the bottom, "This is extraordinary. Can we talk about expanding it?" Emma showed Nathan the comment first. He read it twice, looked at her. "I told you," he said. "You didn't say anything," Emma said. "I thought it," he said, loudly. She rolled her eyes, but it was the kind of eye roll that was really a smile wearing a different face. There were hard months, there were the ordinary ones, which accumulated into years without ceremony. Daniel became more consistent, not transformed, not suddenly fixed, just better at the 40%, more present than he'd been, and Emma accepted this with the fairness she'd always had about him, neither more than it was, nor less. Evelyn's mother recovered fully from the stroke and came to dinner on Sunday evenings sometimes, and sat at their table and ate Nathan's pasta, which had actually gotten better, not dramatically but measurably, and said once to Evelyn, in the kitchen when she thought Nathan couldn't hear, "He's steady, that one." And Evelyn had said quietly, "I know, Mom. I know." Marcus got married 2 years after Nathan and Evelyn, to a woman named Priya who was a civil engineer and who, within 20 minutes of meeting Marcus, had established a clear and functional system for managing his particular form of confident wrongness. Nathan stood beside him at his wedding and felt the clean pleasure of watching someone you love get something they deserve. There were arguments, real ones, not just friction. One in the second year that lasted 3 days and required 2 long conversations and a level of honesty that was uncomfortable before it was useful. They came through it with a better map of each other, the kind you can only make by getting genuinely lost once and finding your way back. There was a period when Evelyn was going through a difficult stretch at work, a school board decision that reversed a program she'd built over 4 years, and she carried it with the tight internal silence Nathan had learned to recognize, and he learned to sit beside it without trying to fix it and to be useful in the ways she actually needed rather than the ways that made him feel helpful. These were not extraordinary things. They were the ordinary friction of 2 lives becoming one, which required more translation than either of them had fully anticipated and more patience than either of them had always managed. But they were real, and they were theirs, and they survived them, each one leaving them slightly more fluent in each other. Emma turned 12 the summer after Nathan and Evelyn's first anniversary. She had grown by nearly 3 inches and had strong opinions about everything, and kept adding to the Volundri language with a consistency that Nathan privately found extraordinary, the sustained private commitment of it, the refusal to abandon a thing just because it was difficult, or because the world outside didn't know about it. For her birthday that year, he gave her a book about constructed languages, a proper linguistic survey, not a children's book, the kind with grammar tables and etymological notes. And she looked at it for a long moment with the expression she reserved for things that landed exactly right. "How did you know about this?" she said. "I've been reading about linguistics," he said. She looked up. "Why?" "Because it interested me," he said. "Because you made it interesting." Emma held the book and looked at him with the measuring gaze, the same one from the coffee shop, from groundwork, from the gymnasium, from every moment of assessment in the 3 years since she'd first looked up from her Volundri map and decided, provisionally, to trust him. The gaze of a person checking something real against something real. "You're a good person," she said. "Not sentimental, just exact." "I try," he said. "You actually try," she said. "That's the difference." 3 years after the wedding, 6 years, almost to the month, from the night at Tilden's, Nathan was sitting on the couch in the Clintonville apartment on a Sunday evening in October, the same season that had started everything, the same particular quality of light doing its thing through the west window. Evelyn was grading papers at the kitchen table. Emma was in her room working on something. Volundri had expanded in recent years to include a history, a mythology, and what Emma described as a legal system that was more equitable than most real ones, which Evelyn had neither agreed nor disagreed with because she suspected Emma was right. The apartment was quiet, in the way of a house that was inhabited by people who were comfortable. The couch was in the place Emma had pointed, where the light hit better. The bookshelves were full to the point of overflow, with the secondary stacks that had accumulated over years of 2 readers sharing space. The kitchen smelled like the pasta that had been dinner, which Nathan had made with a competence that still surprised Evelyn, though she'd stopped admitting that it surprised her. He was reading. The book in his hands was one Evelyn had pressed on him recently, a new one, by an author she'd read before, about a woman who rebuilds a life in a small coastal town. He was 37 pages in, and it was very good, and he kept wanting to put it down to tell her it was very good, which was a feeling he recognized as specific to this apartment, this life, the particular richness of having someone to tell things to. Evelyn looked up from her papers and said, without particular preamble, "What are you reading?" "The one you gave me," he said. "It's good." "I told you," she said. "You're right about books 90% of the time," he said. 93, she said, and went back to grading. Emma appeared in the hallway in pajamas and socks that were different from each other, holding her sketchbook. "I need a word," she said. "In English, for the feeling of finding something you didn't know you were looking for." Nathan and Evelyn both looked at her. "In Volundri there's a word," Emma said, "but I want to know if English has one. Mom said she didn't know." "Serendipity," Evelyn said, "but that's more about luck." "It's not about luck," Emma said. "It's about recognition. You weren't looking for it, and then it's there and you recognize it, which means some part of you already knew." Nathan thought about it. About a wine bar in October and a woman with her own coffee and a name tag that said Evelyn, 43, education. About the precise texture of that first 7 minutes at table 7, the sense, not of finding something exactly, but of recognizing something he hadn't known he was looking for. "I don't think English has an exact word for it," he said. "That's why you're building Volundri." Emma considered this. Then she wrote something in her sketchbook, the private language moving across the page in its own alphabet, and went back to her room. Evelyn watched her go. Then she looked at Nathan. "She's something," Evelyn said. Not for the first time. Not as a new observation. As a thing she said periodically, the way you said things that kept being true. "She is," he said. Evelyn went back to her papers. Nathan went back to his book. The October light came through the west window at its long angle and lit the room in the particular amber of late afternoon giving way to evening, and the apartment held its 3 lives warmly and without effort, the way a place did when it had been lived in properly. Here is what Nathan knew, at 37, in October. On a couch positioned where the light hit better, the life you rebuild after loss doesn't have to be a monument to caution. It can be a house you actually live in. It can have mess and argument and a kitchen that always has too many books on the counter, and a 12-year-old who invented a language to describe things the world's existing languages hadn't gotten around to yet, and a woman who read the same book 4 times and paid a different price each time, and who said yes in a used bookstore at 7:30 on a Friday night, without hesitation, without performance, in the plain and accurate way she said all the true things. He had not been looking for any of this. He had been looking for nothing, or for something he couldn't name, sitting in a wine bar with string lights and a chalkboard and 30 adults doing their best in a room that smelled like candle wax and quiet hope. He had pulled out a chair at table 7 because he was tired of optimizing for what looked right. And that small refusal, that single choice not to walk away from something before it had a chance to be anything, had changed the entire architecture of the rest of his life. This was not a lesson that arrived neatly packaged. It was a thing he'd had to live into, slowly, imperfectly, making mistakes and coming back and staying present when staying present was the harder choice. But it was true. He knew it was true the way you knew the things that had cost you something to learn, not as an idea, but as a fact embedded in the body, in the muscle memory of showing up, in the particular knowledge of what it felt like to be someone's safe place and to have one in return. The greatest opportunities in a life rarely arrive announced. They arrive ordinary. They arrive at awkward mixers and in the coffee aisle of grocery stores and in the amber light of used bookstores that have been on the same corner since before you were born. They arrive looking like nothing in particular, which is why so many people walk past them. Nathan Reed had not walked past. He had pulled out a chair, and everything that mattered had grown from there.